And let's do this, America. This is Dr. Mike Sevilla for Tuesday, August 27, 2014. It is 8:03 p.m. Eastern Time. And here at Family Medicine Rocks World Headquarters, it feels like 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Another great summer day here in northeastern Ohio. I'm very excited about tonight's interview. We'll jump right into it after I introduce our guest. Bryan Vartabedian, MD, is Assistant Professor of Pediatrics at Baylor College of Medicine, and he's been president in the health blogosphere since 2006, which when I started as well. Founder of the website 33charts.com, where he writes about the intersection of medicine, social media, and technology. And next week at Stanford Medicine X, he'll be co-presenting a masterclass on physician and online identity, and here he is. So, Bryan, thank you for the conversation here this evening.
Oh, it's great to be here, Mike. I think for the viewers, we were maybe a minute or two late because we were just sort of chatting it up. We've known each other for some time, and we were just catching up on old times, and so hopefully we'll continue that conversation and have a great time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I see you're working late there tonight. You're really living up to your being a doctor. Are you?
That's right.
You're in clinic there this evening, or where are you at?
So I'm on a backup service for Texas Children's Hospital, and I had clinic patients this afternoon, and so it ran late. And had we been doing this at my house, we would have had a Australian Labradoodle jumping on my lap the entire time, and my kids screaming. So I just figured out a good connection here and thought I'd stay. And so this is the Texas Children's Health Center. This is my clinic where I work, and so hopefully I'm putting on a good show here.
That's cool. No, actually, Bryan, he's in a studio and there's a green screen behind him, so we just wanted to.
Right.
But yeah, we were chatting a lot before the show, and we first met 5 years ago, which in internet years is about 50 years, when we were on a panel together talking about patient privacy. Imagine that. And we could probably talk about the whole show just reminiscing about where people have gone here and there. And
was patient privacy? Was that what it was about?
It was.
Right.
It was. Yeah. So
that was Las Vegas, and Johnson & Johnson or Mark Monceau sponsored us, or
that's right.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Val.
Yeah, we could just keep naming names and stuff,
right.
But
we just look really old.
We'll chat next week at Medicine X, which is our good segue into that. Bryan, you've been there at the conference a couple times, and you've been a speaker there, and just to kind of start off our conversation about Medicine X, kind of, I've never been there. It'll be my first time going there in person. I've seen the live stream, which is fabulous. Kind of what's your impression about attending the meeting and the content and your point of view being there at Stanford Medicine X?
Yeah, it's really a remarkable meeting, Mike. I think it's, as someone who attends medical meetings quite a bit, it really strikes a nice balance between sort of academic and institutional medicine and where the future of medicine is at, and it draws just a remarkable group of people, and that brings energy. I remember a couple years ago I went straight from Medicine X to our pediatric gastro meeting that we had, and leaving the energy of Medicine X and going to this traditional medical meeting, and there's just something about the lack of energy that I was seeing there that made me want to come back to Medicine X again and again. Again, I think the people there really kind of see the future, and that's one of the things that draws me there.
Well, one of the fascinating things is they really kind of place the patient, e-patient. I know some people like that term. I don't like that term, depending on who you talk to, but they kind of do place them at the center when they do feel unwelcome at kind of our type of professional meetings, and it's a meeting like no other. So it'll be interesting for me to kind of see the content, to talk to the people there, to see the Twitter stream, just watching it at home here in Ohio and at Stanford there. I mean, the Twitter stream just kind of blew up. Trying to see all the commentary and try to do that. have you tried to kind of tweet at that meeting, or is it just so overwhelming?
Oh, it's crazy. In fact, if you look at the statistics, if you go on the MedicineX website, there's some nice analysis by Simpler comparing Health2Con, TEDMed, and MedicineX. And if you look at the volume of social dialogue that's happening at MedicineX, it's multiples of what you're seeing at other meetings. And I think it speaks to the fact that it draws such a broad audience, including patients. And you're absolutely right. Larry Chu, who is the brainchild behind MedicineX, has done a stellar job really putting patients front and center with the health conversation. Just as an example, at our master class that we had last year, Wendy Swanson and I, it was on physician identity in among physicians, and we had, in our master class, we actually had e-patients there. You know, initially I might think, well, what would they be doing there? But we have a really intimate conversation going on, and they really contributed nicely to the conversation. And so when you look below the surface, they have a lot. You know, patients have so much to contribute in terms of what we understand as physicians.
And you know, definitely an interesting kind of concept for an entire meeting, because it seems like that these patients have a direct channel to industry and other people, and for people like you and I, for providers, for physicians, we're a little bit on the outside, which I'm not bitter about. It's just a different type of role for that, and you know, for people like you and I, you know, to interface and to interact with each other is kind of a different type of venue, I would think. You
mean like physicians meeting with physicians?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know, it raises an interesting question whether there is a space or a time and a place for doctors just to talk with other doctors, or whether there's a place for patients just to talk to other patients. It's an interesting question. I don't know if I have the answer to it, but certainly there are some issues that are handled doctor to doctor, but I think we've overstated that in the past.
Sure. And what's kind of, you're presenting the same topic this year. What was kind of the feedback and the response from your same topic last year?
So, you know, one of the cool things that Larry has done with MedicineX is that it is always evolving, and one of the things that he added last year was this concept of a master class, and these master classes are real high-touch experiences with people who have experience in different realms of medicine and technology. And so I was fortunate enough to be asked to hold a master class with Wendy Swanson on online identity and presence for physicians, and it was a real intimate group, and we had a lot of interaction, and no PowerPoint presentation, just whiteboard, and we had tremendous feedback, and we're doing it again this year, and apparently there was quite a waiting list to get in, so we're hoping to not to disappoint again this year.
And we talked to you even before, you know, this kind of on the record interview about, you know, if there's people out there that are writing books now and doing this and doing that. When we started, we were just kind of, you know, kind of blogging, whatever that meant. And you talked before about your book called Solved, and that you started a blog because that was the kind of thing to do to sell books at the time. And that was an interesting story there. Is there another book in your future?
In fact, there is. I am just in the final stages of a book that I'm writing for physicians, and it's really essentially a practical guide for life in the connected age. And it's publishing it as a PDF, as a self-published PDF that I'm distributing on an e-commerce site called Tinypass, and I think it'll be available, I think, at the end of September. So I'm pretty excited about that.
And you know, kind of what was the idea behind that? I mean, you do have your 33 charts website / blog. Is this book kind of an extension of that, or what was the idea behind the book?
Yeah. In fact, most of the content, in the book, which I think I'm going to probably announce it on my blog next week. It's really an amalgam of a lot of the practical knowledge and wisdom that I've pulled together over the past 5 or 6 years on 33 charts. You yeah, so I think it's really, I've kind of pieced it together in a way that I think is real practical, and I think people will like it.
So it's, I mean, there's a lot of, kind of tips and tricks and social media guides and all that stuff out there for physicians that are usually written by marketers and non-physicians. How's your book going to be different than that?
I mean, I think probably the most important thing to understand is that there are a lot of books written about social media, and I think we're reaching a point where we're getting beyond just the tools of social media, and we're starting to think about what those tools can bring us. And so in my book, I'm really not spending a lot of time talking about social media per se, but really what social media can do for us and how to handle our public presence, how to handle the common issues of public identity, how to separate personal and professional identity, encounters with patients when you have them, the tension between institutional identity and personal identity. And so I think it'll hopefully offer practical advice to doctors who are new to this space. The big challenge I had, Mike, really was trying to figure out, like, where was the market, or who really needed a book? Because when you go to these meetings and I give talks to doctors, there's always like 3 or 4 different kinds of doctors who are there in the audience. There's the doc who's dead frightened of any sort of public dialogue, right? There's the doc who's participating in public dialogue but is not used on professional means, and then there are the docs that are quite comfortable. They're using it on a professional level, but they really want kind of high-grade tips for how to do it more effectively. So it's really hard to satisfy all those markets together, and so my book is really kind of a pitch to the docs who aren't fully involved yet, or maybe are dabbling. It maybe have it maybe a bit of a manifesto trying to pull people in, and it's making a call to action to participate.
Yeah, I mean, and we've both done some speaking on this to audiences, and I know exactly what you're saying. Is that when you're preparing a talk, or probably when you're preparing a book, it's where on that scale do you address a physician? Because you have the people who are resistant and not involved. You have the people who are curious. You have the people who are using a lot, and there are people who are trying to make a business out of being a professional social media physician, and kind of where on that scale do you direct your comments, or you try to hit everybody? Because me, I'm a generalist by training, and it's hard to kind of, you're not going to make everybody happy. So how did you come with who are you specifically going to target, in a book? Because you can't have 1,000 pages and try to address everybody. Right,
and this is the challenge when you're speaking to physician audiences about public presence as well. It's like the audience is so skewed, and you ask the meeting planners what they want, and they say, well, just give us a little bit of everything, and of course that really doesn't work. And so I think for most of these presentations, at least my approach has been to look at the audience as kind of socially naive, if you'll allow that term, meaning people who just don't have as much experience, and they need that case made for them. They need the value proposition for a public presence.
And I've seen you kind of speak in the past, and I encourage people to do some searches on YouTube for some of the talks that you've given in the past, and I love the case that you make about being a public physician. When you get that degree, you were a public physician, and it's not like it was 50, 60, 70 years ago when other people and other entities were kind of driving the message, and future physicians and those physicians now and medical students, kind of have to learn how to be this public presence, not only in person but also digitally as well. Can you touch on those ideas a little bit?
I would say that today's physician is thoroughly unprepared to deal with today's communication environment, and you're absolutely right. Back in the day, or for most of modern civilization, other people have been responsible for conveying the message of the physician. Someone else decided what we would say and how we would look, and we really looked one way to the media. The AMA represented us, our public affairs offices at our local hospitals represented us, and again, we looked one way. But we're seeing with the democratization of media, we're seeing the emergence of all these various voices, and we all are publishers, and again, we're all public whether we intend to be or not. As you said, I like to bring that example when that young woman goes across the stage and gets her medical diploma and updates her Facebook status. She's a public physician. Or the moment you lay your hands on a patient, you are then part of the public dialogue. So many doctors think that I'm going to opt out of this. I don't want to have a blog, and therefore I'm going to just sort of remain under my exam room table, and hopefully this whole digital thing will just pass. But the reality is we're all now part of the conversation, and we all have to learn how to manage that effectively. And we can choose to actively manage it, or we can choose to sort of let other people decide how we're going to be how we're going to look and how we're perceived. So this is a very, very important time for us, and this comes to bear with the way we train students too. We're graduating medical students who are unprepared for this environment, and we've made some strides at Baylor College of Medicine with our Digital Smarts program, which is a longitudinal curriculum for training our doctors for this type of public dialogue and public presence. And so I think you're going to see that happening more and more as medical schools see the need to prepare doctors for the digital age.
So you kind of were part of the creation of that curriculum. I mean, do they just kind of get introduced? I mean, I guess they wouldn't get introduced to Facebook, but they would get introduced to the impact of that in a professional type setting as future physicians, that type of thing. Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of this program stemmed from the fact, again, that our students really aren't prepared to deal with their public presence. They really come to medical school with quite facile with day-to-day conversations with text and whatnot. But what happens is most of these students haven't had real accountability up until the point they reached medical school, and once they hit the clinical wards and medicine becomes part of their life, there's a real clash between the expectations of a healthcare system, which puts a premium on privacy, and the clash with their expectations of transparency and ease of communication. And so we try to help them help ease that transition and help them understand what the limits are. Our program runs over 4 years, and we touch our students, I think, 4 times. We're probably going to reduce that possibly to 3 times. At orientation and early in medical school, we really work on mitigating the risk associated with public dialogue, and as they approach their 4th year, we really kind of work on the opportunity afforded by public presence. So much of our discussion that we have, Mike, is based upon the risk that we face with all of these tools. No one wants to talk about the opportunity, only the risk. And I would say lastly that our curriculum is really contextual, and so we don't talk about iPhone use or friending patients on Facebook until right before they go on the wards, because if you do that at orientation,
yeah, I mean, you talk about risk, and it's people may or may not know. I started as an anonymous blogger.
Yeah.
Because I was concerned about the risk and didn't tell the docs in my practice or my patients when I first started out. And something that you touch on in one of your talks is this culture of permission, and you share a story about medical students. But that is what I kind of felt when I started, is like, oh, do I have to ask my partners? Do I have to ask my patients? Do I have to ask this person or that person? Can you share a little bit about that story about this great discussion that you had with medical students, and then this permission thing that kept away?
Yeah. I teach on the wards at Texas Children's Hospital, and I had a couple of female medical students not long ago, and we normally, when I'm on the wards, we're talking about diarrhea and reflux and worms and
the really good stuff.
Yeah, flatulence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Borborygmi, all those.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so for some reason they didn't want to talk about those things that day, and we got onto digital medicine, and they kind of knew that I was sort of into this sort of thing, and one thing led to another, and they had we started talking about how medical education needs to change to meet this new generation, and they had the most remarkable ideas. And as they were talking, and as we were kind of jamming there, I said, we ought to take this, put this together as a blog post. And Kevin Poe would post it on Kevin MD. I was imagining where it might go, and they suddenly got silent, and their eyes started to shift, and they said, where do we get permission to do that? And I knew right at that moment that the whole thing was done, because if it went down that path, it really probably would be much more difficult. And so it really illustrates this culture of permission that we bring doctors up in. We don't feel that we have the ability to step up to the mic or to write a blog post or to say something without somebody's permission. And I can't tell you the number of times I have had doctors come up to me and say, where do I get permission to start a blog? Who do we talk to at the hospital to do that? And it's so eye-opening for them to hear that you really don't need permission to do that, but they don't quite understand that either. So it's such a foreign concept.
And kind of one of the the unintended consequences of that is like something that you addressed earlier, was that that if we as providers and physicians don't make the message, other people will make the message, and tons of people are still using the example of vaccines and autism, and I'm still having some parents ask me about it, and it's been debunked, and it's been not out, it's been officially bad data, but people still do that. But you kind of I've heard you blame us, blame physicians, blame pediatricians, blame primary care people, and say you were part of the problem why this bad information got spun out there in the first place.
Yeah. I in 2009 I raised this question about the moral obligation to participate, and the concept is kind of carried because it's so counterintuitive. Okay, we assume that everything that happens with regard to social dialogue is frivolous and silly and a waste of time, when in fact there's a lot of very serious health conversation happening in the public realm, and as I've suggested, we have some moral obligation to be out there participating in it. And the vaccine example is a classic example that when we were not there to counter the message of these loud zealots, the conversation was completely hijacked. And I always hold America's pediatricians accountable for that, for the whole vaccine kerfuffle, because we weren't there. I was there. There were a few of us there countering that, but it serves as a solid example is why why we need to be there. Another example is on Twitter. We see this constantly, that medical advances, especially in the realm of like technology and tech advances, people just love to put them out on Twitter. The more outrageous, the better. But no one ever questions whether these things might actually be good for patients. A great example is last week there was an announcement about this teddy bear that quantifies, as a child cuddles it can measure heart rate and all these other things, and everybody was passing it around like the beach ball at the football game, right? And Wendy Swanson spoke up and said, hey, wait a minute, there may be some issues with having this teddy bear being used continuously in a hospital with respect to hygiene and infectious risk. And so these product managers that devise these products out in Silicon Valley, I don't think have quite the wisdom that you and I have, Mike, and some other physicians. And so I think we need to be chiming in terms of what's good. This is what's good for patients, and it's a type of advocacy, really.
It is, and I don't know if you deal with this, but I know my office almost every day. I know exactly what's on the Today Show at 7 a.m. because I get phone calls about it, or I know what's on Dr. Oz that day, and just like you have these things with technology, I'm like, oh, what about this herbal thing? What about this other herbal thing? And I saw it on Dr. Oz, and they didn't say that there was any side effects or problems, so there's probably the means that it's safe. So it's dealing with that type of information, and I know you do too. Try to educate patients and saying, what is really people's motivation for saying that? Are they are they selling product, or are they doing this, or are they doing that? Do they really have the patient's and families best interest in mind? And that is an opportunity to do that, but sometimes it is kind of, sometimes I take most of my patient visits trying to uneducate some of that stuff that they see on television or on the internet sometimes.
Yeah, I call it preemptive online literacy, which is, well, I'll tell families, if I have a child with eosinophilic gastritis or eosinophilic duodenitis, I know they're going to see a lot about parasites when they search on Google, and so I say, listen, here's what you're going to find, and I sort of help prepare them for their search and what they're going to do. But with regard to this, the information stream, which I sometimes call a sewer sometimes, I think we as a profession are in a unique position to sort of define ourselves in some way. I think this could be a real role for the medical profession, which I think is really looking for a way to reshape itself or redefine itself in this public arena.
And we also talked, about before we went live, is that you described my bandwidth. I when I first started, I wasn't. I was just a young new physician coming out and wanted to explore some of this stuff. And now, if people don't know, I'm a full-time primary care family physician in a group with 5 other family docs in small town Ohio, where we see patients every day. We go to the hospital, we go to the nursing homes, we do all that, and I come home and I'm still doing, my electronic charting and doing this and doing that. I'm not, whining. It's just like times are different now than they were even 5 years ago. And, I wish I had, more time to get out there and expand my footprint, as you said, and to write and do this more. And it's just been really frustrating for me just to try to do what I say what I want to do and expand my signal and to do that more. It's just really frustrating just with the reality of our broken healthcare system these days.
No, it's a big challenge, of course, getting doctors to participate and certainly to create content. I know early on I used to bang the podium and say that every doctor should be creating content and having a blog, and the reality is that most physicians simply don't have the time to write and record and do all those things that. But that is, Mike, where the money is. I don't mean like in the figurative sense, but I always like to say that there are two things on the internet, right? There's content and there's conversation, and so what you really want to do is be creating that content that everyone else is having conversations about. But if you can't do that, a lot of docs can't. They don't have the time, like you said, to do that. You can curate. You can be part of the conversation. You can push along the things that other people are creating, and that's a fine role. Not everyone has to be creating the dramatic blog posts that change the world, but you can pass those messages along, and that's a very valuable role.
Well, one of the slides that I have in my mind is where you have at the top of the pyramid, you have creation of content, and then you have curation and communication and consumption and conversation.
Right.
I think it really encapsulates kind of what is out there for physicians and social media and how to integrate both of those.
Yeah, it's a tower of engagement. So everybody consumes, right? That's at the bottom. Everybody consumes. It kind of describes what people do in the online, and everybody consumes. A lot of people are having conversations. Some people curate, and the very smallest number create. And again, the top of the ladder is where the real money is. When you're creating that content that everyone else is having the conversations about, that's when you can really have influence as a physician or as an e-patient or anyone else like that.
So, the part of the conversation I'm really kind of looking forward to is that, we've kind of been around at the same time, and we've seen a lot of trends in the past, 5+ years and things, and, as far as, big picture type of physicians and social media and digital technology and, where do you kind of see things going? I know you've talked about the need for digital literacy and that type of thing, but are we as much different than where we were 5 years ago as far as your hopes and dreams and goals for providers and physicians and things?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it was so funny in 2008 to be on Twitter and to watch the conversations, and I think that there was a Health 2.0 really, there was a real fantasy associated with it in the early years. I think we really thought that all conversations would be happening a lot more freely between doctors and patients in these public areas, and I think some of these fantasies have not quite come to bear, and it's been a little bit slower advancing than we thought it might have been back in 2008. But I think things are changing, things are advancing. I mean, what's so interesting is to watch the changing role of the physician. I would say that on some level we've been marginalized by Health 2.0, probably by our own doing. We've not been diligent in sort of keeping pace with the rest of the world. But we clearly are being redefined. Communications redefining it. Technology is redefining what we do. And I always like to think about what our role is going to be here in the next 10, 20 years. And certainly as a medical educator, we have to think about those things in terms of designing our curriculum for shaping the next generation. So I'm most excited thinking about how doctors and how our role is changing, and it's really exciting to see physicians take or patients rather, take a more active role in their care.
And I have medical students kind of shouting me all the time in my office, and sometimes I bring up some of these digital conversations as well, and I have some of the same conversations that you do, but it seems like what my observations are that medical students are a little bit more empowered using their smartphone and apps, and I learn about all the cool medical education apps that they have now, and we talked even before this interview, is that medical students don't even go to class anymore. All their lectures are on podcasts and live streams and things, and it's not like when we were back in school there, Brian, as far as right. Getting to school and getting all your 15 highlighters and taking notes and things.
Well, but I will say, Mike, that we do make certain assumptions about this generation too. I taught a course at Rice University with Kirsten Oster, who's also going to be at Medicine X. You'll meet her, called Medicine in the Age of Networked Intelligence, where we kind of brought, most of them were pre-meds, we brought them through all the changes that have happened in the past 10, 20 years and how it's impacting medicine. And part of the class was the creation of online content, and it was just absolutely remarkable to watch these 21-year-olds writing blog posts. They were quite comfortable with posting to Facebook and text messaging, but when it came to publicly airing their ideas and doing it in the format of a blog, a lot of them really were not that comfortable with it. There were many that didn't know how to add a hyperlink to a piece of online text. So we do make certain assumptions about this generation that aren't really founded in reality. So, and also the older folks too. We always assume the old folks don't. Old folks like us don't want to participate or can't participate, but in fact, that isn't true either. So.
Yeah, well, one of the things that you talk about in your talks is this need for digital literacy for everybody, but especially medical students. How to write in 140 characters, how to educate patients in 140 characters, how to deal with this huge volume of information that is out there, how to kind of curate that. Can you touch a little bit about what you think the future physicians need?
Well, the concept of literacy is important because, I think about the future physician. I look at an entirely different, set of skills that they're going to need. Go back to when I was trained, or when you were trained. It was really the analog era, and all of our skill sets were analog skill sets. We had to learn how to go to the library and pull journals out of the stacks, right? We have to learn how to use a Xerox machine and how to use a recorded handheld recorder for dictating.
Oh, I love those Xerox machines. I think I still have my card, and I still remember getting into fights with my other medical students saying, "This is my Xerox time. Get out of my way." And those were the days.
Those were men when men were men, and we had to learn how to get our way around a paper chart. And so those were all analog skills. And for this generation, they're going to face an entirely new set of skills. We're facing the fact that we're no longer going to be isolated functioning physicians, but we're part of a broader network of connected physicians with respect to our knowledge. This is the first generation that's going to not just memorize and learn everything they need to learn like we did, but they're going to have to learn how to access information, which is entirely new way of thinking. Learning how to work in micro style and micro communication, and of course how to handle ourselves in public dialogue with patients. All these are skill sets that docs are going to need to have. I mean, I can't predict what docs are going to need to do 20 years from now, and that's really the challenge with planning a medical curriculum. But it is fun to think about.
Another thing that popped out at me when I was reading, or when I was watching some of your talks, is that the access to the physician is a lot different now than it was 50 years ago, where there was this kind of hierarchy of things, where it was the American Medical Association and reporters had to contact the hospital to get to you, and I know there's a story that you shared in one of your talks where you were directly contacted on Twitter by a news organization.
Yeah. When I was on CBS This Morning not long ago, and the executive producer reached out to me and followed me on Twitter, and I think one of the marketing execs at our hospital said, "Right, they're supposed to call us when they want media contact," and so kind of a conversation that they see me out there every day, they know me, and so I'm frequently, just as you are, Mike, contacted by media organizations for commentary and dialogue about all these changes we're going through, and they have direct access to us. We don't really need a gatekeeper for these things anymore. I mean, truth be told, I with major placements and major media, I do contact my my mother institutions to let them know what I'm doing, but for most media engagements, it's something I just do on my own, and the media finds me.
Yeah, but from what I remember is that it wasn't in response to an op-ed, in a newspaper or a television interview or something like that. It was something you put on your blog, and that's how they reach out to you. Is that right?
Yeah. Most people find me through my blog, and I'd probably say that's true. And it's been valuable too. I'll tell you another story. Have you heard of Buckyballs?
I have not heard of that.
You've not heard of Buckyballs?
No, I'd have to Google it.
So Buckyballs are these high-powered rare earth magnets that you play with at your desk and you waste time with. It's more of a waste of time than some of the things that we do. But you can build things, and they're really powerful. And they're a lot of fun to play with. And they're shiny, and they're heavy, and children love to put them in their mouths, actually. And so we noticed as an organization, the North American Society of Pediatric Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition started to notice that we're seeing more and more cases of these magnet ingestions. And the problem with these rare earth magnet injections is when a child takes two of them, that's come together, and in between the magnets, the tissue gets strangulated, becomes necrotic, and they perforate.
Whoa.
So right at the ER down below me, just a couple of years ago, I had patients coming in with these magnet injections. So we started seeing more and more of them. We reached out to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. They thought there was something to this. I think there were 9 manufacturers of rare earth magnets, and all of them except one or two yielded to the Consumer Product Safety Commission's letter to pull these toys, but there was one that didn't. It was Buckyballs. And so what they did was they invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in a social media campaign that really kind of leveraged the sentiments of the extreme right, Rush Limbaugh and others, and it became a personal civil liberty issue. And they had this campaign called Save Our Balls, which, how brilliant is that?
Yeah. It doesn't get a bit better than that, actually.
Yeah, it doesn't get better than that. So the director of our pediatric GI organization called me and said, "Brian, you're the Twitter guy. Come on, help us out here. And I said, listen, I can't counter this this campaign that's being funded and driven by some publicists in New York City. And I kind of had to talk. I said, listen, this is why I've been telling you all that we need to all be present in the public space, so when these things happen, we can advocate for our patients. So I said, well, here's what we can do. Let's mobilize some of the children's hospitals. We'll post blogs, do a blog campaign, and I did that. And turns out that one of the reporters from the New York Times reads my blog and got passed over to one of the consumer business guys, and he wrote a story about it in the New York Times. It got more and more visibility. The American Academy of Pediatrics got behind it, put some money behind it, and we created some political pressure, and Buckyballs ultimately yielded to it and decided to pull their product. But it's a good example of another example of why we need to be there. Beyond promoting ourselves and our clinics and our hospitals, we need to be advocating on that level when there are products like this that are highly funded.
Yeah, and I do remember reading some recent essays and blog posts that you've written saying, we're kind of beyond the cheerleader stage, or cheerleader, whatever you say about that and that. And I have talked with a lot of my friends in the family medicine community, and to do our own advocacy. But advocacy and social media, that is, that's being done more and more now. But I don't think it's really talked about that much. Kind of in this health social sphere, that in this bubble that we find ourselves, and advocacy for our specialty, for our patients, for our community. I think something that should be talked about more. I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've always said, if there was a crisis tomorrow, we really don't, as pediatricians. I don't know about family practice docs. You guys are actually pretty well organized on Twitter. I've been impressed, but. We really don't have a formal way to kind of mobilize a social movement among pediatricians. The American Academy of Pediatrics has taken a more active role in this, and they have a woman who's trying to harness the most influential thought leaders and people who have some modicum of an audience to be able to leverage us in these situations like this, which I think is really smart, because it doesn't do us any good if we're not organized on any level. And part of this gets back to the idea that doctors, trying to get doctors together is like herding cats, right?
Oh no, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying about that.
In Texas, in Austin, the legislature is run by the chiropractors because you can't get doctors to join the Texas Medical Association, and it's a problem.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that too here in Ohio, and it's probably all around. And maybe there's, the physicians have kind of had this kind of learned helplessness as far as being legislatively active, because they really haven't seen, a lot of activity. They've seen, especially in primary care and family practice, kind of an erosion of their scope of practice by other groups. And that's been very frustrating. And there's been, a decrease in membership in organized medicine, and there's kind of, I wouldn't say splinter groups, but these other kind of small advocacy groups that, that don't have the funding to make an impact on the legislative level. And you're right. I mean, what are physician advocacy groups going to do these days? Trying to change the law, trying to get access to legislators, and so yeah, I mean, so I guess it kind of comes back to trying to get people at least minimum some kind of social media advocacy, social media presence, social media footprint, to try to make them aware that they could try to make a difference for their specialty and their patients and their community.
At the end of the day, Mike, I think it really comes down to proving value. I talk to a lot of docs on small groups and larger groups about engagement, just as you do, and you really have to. Same with an application or a mobile app or anything. No doc's going to pick it up and use it unless you can show there's some kind of value to it. And just looking at social dialogue, the value comes only with a significant investment of time, as you know. And so it can be a real challenge trying to get doctors on board for that level of advocacy and to build audiences that can be leveraged in this way. But that's one thing I've learned is you really kind of have to show value at some point.
And it's weird because, I mean, it's kind of the same thing that we talked about on that first panel 5 years ago. It's like we're banging our head against the wall, for the past 5 years, trying to bring that message across. And especially in my community, I've been seeing some results that I can show people. But when I talk to people in general, it's still kind of, what is the value of social media for physicians? And it's still a tough pitch, but, not as a tough pitch as 5 years ago.
Well, I would counter, Mike, by saying that I think you overlook the fact that the numbers of physicians in the public arenas has really risen dramatically. I mean, if you look at, just an example, I started a 33 charts Twitter feed, and I follow mostly physicians on it, and it's been very interesting to watch that because I've created something of a filter bubble for myself with my personal Twitter page. Twitter feed rather, but on 33 charts, I'm watching the stream of just physicians, and it is absolutely amazing who's out there. And I have to confess, I've been completely blind to some of the most amazing voices that I've discovered since following that stream. And I think it is. I think you're understating the fact that there are a lot of physicians out there, and we're seeing a lot of amazing voices emerging, and I think we're making real headway. And that presence is really helping those docs individually. It's helping their hospitals, and certainly if you look at the, is it FMR Revolution? Is that it?
Yeah, it's a FM Revolution. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you guys have been doing a nice job there, I think.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of work and a lot of time, but yeah, we're seeing results from that. So we're very happy with it, and we're building on that. Kind of in our remaining moments, I did want to go back to your book a little bit. So you're writing it, you're getting ready to finish it. Could you talk a little bit about what is that platform that you're using there, and why did you choose that?
So, yeah, it's a good question. I'm using an e-commerce site called Tinypass. So the deal here is this. When you look at publishing is kind of interesting because I published my first 2 books with major New York publishers, Ballantine Random House and St. Martin's Press. And so I've been through the whole process of publishing with a mainstream publisher, and I really wanted to try something different. And a lot of what my book talks about is really the empowered physician and our capacity to really harness this media and do amazing things. And so I really wanted to walk the walk and talk the talk with this book by taking a $19 piece of software, writing my book on it, pushing it out as a PDF, and on this e-commerce site, Tinypass. And my hope is that I'm viewing it almost like Kickstarter. So people can buy it. I'm going to get feedback. I'm going to see what kind of traction there is, make a little money. I'm going to invest back into it and probably reformat it after a couple of iterations for Kindle and iBook and everything else. But that's kind of how I chose to do it. My last books, it seems like publishing, when you finish a book, it's the end. You send it, it's printed on a dead tree, and that's the end of it. And I have to wonder whether books really should be an ongoing. It should be the start of a conversation. That's what I'm hoping this book is going to be, a start of a conversation. And our public presence is changing and evolving so fast. I'm hoping that I can iterate it over and over again and make it a useful tool over a couple of editions.
So would it be fair to say that kind of this initial release may be kind of a quote-unquote final draft, and you're kind of crowdsourcing a little bit, getting feedback and doing another iteration and second edition, third edition, beta edition, all that type of stuff?
Exactly. Yeah, you view it that way. I mean, I think it's quality enough for someone to buy it and to get value from it. But I think it's going to evolve and it's going to change. And to think that a book like in this subject area wouldn't evolve is absolutely crazy. The good news is, so if someone buys it for $6 or whatever, and I revise it in March, you're always going to get that revision so long as it's on Tinypass. I think if I move it to Amazon or iBooks, I'm probably not going to be able to transfer that over. But so if you buy it, you'll get all subsequent editions of it until it goes somewhere else.
Wow, that's interesting.
So we have to get you on there.
Yeah, as soon as I finish my charts, jeez.
Yeah, that's where my blog came from. 33 charts. I used to sit late at night in the clinic like this, and on Twitter I'd narrate how many charts I had left, and that's where the name came from.
And that's when there were still paper charts, or was that electronic charts?
No, that was Logician. We're now on Epic. But,
Nice. Yeah.
So Logician would tell me how many charts I had in the queue, and so.
Yeah, I'll ask you about Epic, but that's a whole different show.
No.
So you're going to maybe announce it next week, or you'll be talking about it next week on your blog?
Yeah, I'm probably going to do something today. So it's cool. I'm excited, and I'm approaching it a little differently than the way most people handle things, but we'll see. And that's kind of the way I've been handled most things, and so we'll see where it floats.
Wow! So breaking news right here. So yeah. all the handful of people who are watching us live, you will get the first crack at this out there. So
it's good to jam with you, Mike. This has been great.
Yeah. Before we kind of close things up, I mean, we've talked about a bunch of stuff. Any closing thoughts for the audience? Anything else that I didn't ask you about that we should that we know about before?
No, I think we covered a lot of good stuff. You can go to 33charts.com and read a little bit more about my thinking of what I'm doing, and I look forward to seeing everyone there on Twitter.
Is there a title for the book, or are you leaving that for next week, kind of a cliffhanger?
I'm leaving it next week.
Nice, very good.
We're close, though. We're close.
Cool. Leaving people wanting more. So.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so thanks a lot for joining me here this evening. Great conversation. Follow him on Twitter, Dr_V33charts.com. We'll be tweeting away next week at Stanford, and I'll be having some more interviews coming up. Just follow my Twitter feed, DrMikeSevilla, and check out my website, DrMikeSevilla.com. So we will talk to you all very soon. So thanks everybody for joining us live, and also on demand watching it on YouTube. So bye everybody.
Thank you.